My grandmother, Zabel Kuljian, survived the Armenian genocide. She was 10 years old when the events that would change her life began. She was the sole survivor of her family. Her parents, grandparents, siblings, uncles, and aunts, except for one, were all murdered by the Ottoman soldiers. Growing up, I heard many stories of her harrowing experiences. At age 80, she wrote a memoir of the genocide. All of us who were given a copy cherish her story. She was from an affluent and influential family in the town of Zile, in central Turkey. They had always lived in complete harmony with their Turkish neighbors. In April of 1915, her father went missing. He had gone on a business trip and never returned. A few weeks later, Turkish soldiers arrived at the doorstep, and they took her family to their church's courtyard. Soon they rounded up all the Armenian families and brought them to the courtyard. In every case, the head of the family had been taken away. Most of them were murdered. The families were given no food. This lasted 3 days. Next, they were ordered to march. This death march would cover more than 450 miles and last more than 9 months. Of the 3,000 from Zila who began the march, only 15 or 20 survived. This is where the horrors began. They were denied food and water. They would drink and eat anything they could find to survive. On the journey, many were tortured and slaughtered. Most died from starvation. They were too weak to defend themselves. Many women and children were raped. The soldiers, even ordinary citizens, would laugh as they killed the innocent victims. No one was spared. My grandmother saw her brothers die of starvation. She was separated from her mother. She was cared for by her Aunt Anna, who also miraculously survived. One of the most disturbing stories I remember hearing was about the burning of newborn babies. Apparently, Turkish soldiers would build large bonfires along the road. All the women who had babies were taken to the fire and forced to throw their babies into the flames. After this, they were forced to dance as their newborn babies burned to death. Those who refused to dance had their throats slit. A story I'll never forget is about how my grandmother escaped having her throat slit. Some teenage boys captured my grandmother and 4 other girls. They were too weak to resist. Their hands and feet were tied. They were thrown into a very shallow stream. One boy brandished a large knife. One by one, he slit the girls' throats. My grandmother was fourth in line. The boy held the knife above her head. She said a prayer. Just before he was about to strike, a gunshot rang out. A soldier on horseback had stumbled upon them and fired his rifle into the air. He asked the boy what he was doing, and he responded that he was merely killing infidels. The soldier told him to leave. It was a miracle. Next, rich Turkish families captured my grandmother and other child survivors. They were forced to work as slaves for these families for 3 years. Later on, they were rescued by French soldiers and taken to a Red Cross orphanage in Lebanon. My grandmother stayed there for over a year. And then a letter arrived stating that if she agreed to marry a man in New York, he would send the money for her passage. That man was my grandfather, Zabel Kuljian. He was 31 years old and my grandmother was 16. The ladies at the orphanage told my grandmother that she had to go. She was lucky. She arrived in the United States, married a man she didn't know, and raised 4 children. These children gave her 10 grandchildren. I am one of them.